So this week I went, first off, I went back and I put into Word an image, one of my worries, I suppose, or problems, possible problems that I was expecting I might have when processing this driftwood. The shipworms really did a job on it, and I noticed this as soon as I started removing the external kind of silvered or um, weathered outer surface of the wood, and then revealed all these little holes. They weren't too bad. The surface might have been a bit weaker, but when I started got to the middle of it, I suppose that's when I noticed all these big boreholes that the shipworms had created, and that kind of worried me how the wood would stand up, what strength it would have. I suppose when I glued all the panels together laterally like that, it kind of gave it a bit of strength and ensured that they could kind of depend on each other for strength. So that was my first problem or possible issue that kind of came relevant. I had one or two small difficulties with that when it came to actually processing it further later on. So I'm currently, I'm currently in the realization final kind of aspects. Few developed ideas, had to adjust, experiment with some different jigs and some different methods as well, putting it all together. So here is my lid. I took the second piece of driftwood and I stripped it really, really thin. It was actually an excess piece I took with me just by chance. Um, it was about five, I think it's 5 mil. And I said it just looked well. I said I'd take it home anyways, and luckily it came in well. I was able to glue it and shape it into the lid, and then the base there, these I had cut down in the lab, and I shaped them here at home with a bit of sandpaper. Um, Here are the corner pieces out of that piece as well with the hardwood. There are some dowels drilled and using the center pins to find the center on the panels to make sure that everything lines up. As you can see down this one, that's not actually a borehole or a dowel, that's actually a borehole from one of the shipworms. It's almost exactly 10 mil across. The dowels almost fit perfectly into it. It's just a little bit oval shape, which is kind of mad to see. Um, so one of my first issues, so after I changed the size, I started doweling or drilling the holes. The dowels were 40 mil in length, and that would have been fine until I had to change the size of the wood, so it's 30 by 30, and I was having a 30 arc on that. So when I drilled them 20 mil in, they're actually overlapping in here. It was fine. It wasn't breaking out the far side here, but if I was to put in the curve, they were busting out there. They actually started overlapping, and this caused a problem because one was far enough in, but one was almost 5 mil, 10 mil too long. So that was, luckily I had extra pieces cut actually, otherwise this would have been a big problem. So I was able to kind of learn from that. My first plan was to reduce the dowels to 30 mil. That was fine, that would work. But then I had an issue with that corner there. When I would put in that 30 mil arc, that was really gonna cut that pretty tight on the corner there. So moving on from that, I decided to change the shape of it even more and add 10 mil. So these are now 15. They're just about meeting. They just almost touch. They're not even meeting properly. And then I've raised 10 on the corner there. So that rounds it off, but it doesn't completely curve it or cut it in, and it keeps it nice and strong. So when I was doing this, I created a stencil and I cornered them, marked them out, and I created a jig there. So it was had to plane the edges off there so it fit in the vice square, so as to hold this, and I put a stop at the end. So when the plane was working on that, it held it perfectly in place, and I was able to work away on that. And you can see underneath I put the chamfer on there as well. So this actually worked out really well, as you see in the photos. It's shown off the heartwood really well. Another issue I had, one of the boreholes had come through and through. So when I drilled, this wasn't visible. It basically stopped right there. When I drilled through, it busted out the side and created this. So it was visible and the dowel was loose. So I had to, hang on now. to square it off, and I took away the waste, and then I took some of the extra heartwood that are 5mm, and that actually fit perfectly there. I had to re-drill that a little bit, and that was nice, and that covered it up nicely. Once there's a finish on that, it won't look too bad at all. So this is the front, this is the back. I dry clamped it, no glue, dowels, make sure everything lined up nicely. One or two corners are just a little bit off, but a little bit of sandpaper and that'll be nice and flush. And so fit perfectly, and the chamfer is doing the job, allowing that to fit in. If I didn't take the chamfer off the middle there, after those corners, the tin wouldn't actually fit. So you can see the cut section there. And then when I was gluing it up, I glued all four 2 and 2 and the front and back panel. So I did these to make sure everything was square first off, and then I was able to put in the two side panels. So instead of gluing everything at once, I glued it in 2 steps, making sure that everything was squared off and there was nothing going askew basically. So that keeps everything nice and straight. Borrowed some clamps from the secondary school here at home, just to make sure that it was nice and tight, because mine weren't big enough.